Well, this is the last video in this series. Probably you're glad about that. I don't know. It's been fun doing these things, but we still have to look at the ears on the late maturing hybrids here. I think we got 5 of them, don't we, Ryan?
Right, so we looked at a couple of these hybrids on the plot scale. Now we're going to look a little bit closer on the ear scale. We pulled 2 of the hybrids that we talked about before, the 2 Seed Consultants lines, 1188 and 1168. So we have those available to us to look. We didn't have them in the plots. We're going to look a little bit closer. We're going to look at ear size, we're going to look at kernel quality, we're going to look at kernel depth, and we're going to look at any kind of disease characteristics we're seeing on those kernels on those ears.
Yeah, it's going to be fun looking at 2 hybrids we weren't able to see in the plots here by checking out their ear characteristics. So let's go do that.
These are going to include the 2 Seed Consultants lines that I mentioned before. I was able to get a boat out there and row to the actual hybrids and get its ears pulled off. So we got some ears that we're going to look at. Seed Consultants 1188, Seed Consultants 1168, Dynagrove 58 VC65, DCAB 6744, and DCAB 6869. Dad, what do you see with these ears?
Well, there's some differences here, aren't there? You know, maybe it's that boat you rode out there, but there's sure some difference here in kernel numbers on these ears. We do know that we did see that plot had a lot of water sitting in it, that 68, 69. That may be true for this one.
That's absolutely true for that
Yeah.
1188. There was a lot of water sitting in that plot.
See, that's the beauty of these OVT. If you were to do this on your farm in a strip trial, you'd end up like this. But here, we can randomize, put these hybrids on better plots in the next rep and get better data then that way. So we can really get a true comparison. Isn't that what
That's right. Like the sharks pointed me in the right direction, and we have a ridge on the back of this field actually where it's not as wet. So we've got variations. We're going to have variations across each location. That's true for every single farm in North Carolina. You cannot find a farm in North Carolina that doesn't have a variation of soil type, soil elevation, or soil drainage. And so we do multiple reps. We do 4 reps at each location, and that allows us to take out any kind of variance that we may see across that location. If we have reps that happen to be really weedy or don't establish well, we can drop them and still have 3 reps of good quality data. That's our best predictive value. When we can have multiple rep tests across multiple environments in North Carolina, we can predict at a high level how those hybrids are going to perform year in and year out.
Exactly. You know, even so, this 1188, right?
1188.
1188.
Exactly.
Boy, 68, 88, those are easy to get confused. It looks good. The kernel quality is good here. So yeah, that just had a little stress here as it was trying to finish pollinating. If we look again at kernel depth here, about a medium kernel depth on this ear here. Again, keep in mind what the environment was for that. Now we get to the 1168 here. This one has really dented up, so you can tell this is moving along, but really nice ear. It's sort of a medium yellow rather than a dark golden yellow kernel here. You know, look at the kernel depth. I think it's a little better than the 88 as far as that goes. So, yeah, a lot of rows here, though. Boy, we sure put on a lot of rows on these ears in this season. Now we moved here to the Dynagrove, DKBC 58 VC65.
Say it along, everybody.
I gotta say it that really slowly. Again, this has been a solid performer. You can tell by the deep yellow kernels and the size of the ears, this is going to be good corn out here, much better than any of the medium hybrids that we looked at earlier. So that's what a really nice ear here looks like. Oh, look at the depth of kernels there. That's what really makes this hybrid, I think, shine. Got really good kernel depth here, dark orange yellow kernels. So now we get to the 6744, the old. I call it old. It ain't been around that many years, but it's old in the standpoint of hybrids, corn hybrids here. Again, a beautiful looking ear. We actually had some ears here of that thing that were even bigger. We had to make a decision. How many of these that were out there? There's going to be a good yield in it. Probably, if I had to choose right now today, this would be the plot that probably I think is going to top this OVT here, this site this year. Look at this kernel depth here. Again, nice kernel depth on lots of rows on these ears here. Again, I think this is going to be our best hybrid. Look at the dark orange color. That's why I talked about it, the 6869. It's one of the best kernel quality hybrids that I see in the OVT. Again, this ear's been affected by some of that water problems that it set in. We look at kernel depth here, really nice kernel depth despite what it's been through. So that gives you an idea what some of these ears look like and some of the quality that we're seeing here. There's going to be some good corn here.
So I have two questions for you on this hybrid test. One, these two seed consultants lines were right next to each other in the first rep. What does that tell you, given the ear difference that you're seeing, and they're both in water standing environments? What does that tell you for the ability of those hybrids to respond to stress?
Well, it sure says the 68 has a lot better stress tolerance than the 88 under wet feet conditions like we've had here at this site.
And I think that proves out with our data. We've seen the 1168 being in the top yield group over multiple years in our tests. Given that each year is different, we got different stressors each year, we're going to see that one rise to the top because it's able to be consistent across multiple years. Right. Now, you know what question number 2 is going to be.
No, what?
What's the yield?
Oh, the yield. Oh my goodness, we got to do that. I'll pick the 6740. You know, I might make one comment. You know, I mentioned down there that 68, 69 I thought was one of the top yielders and better yielding than 67, but that's certainly not going to be the case here, I think, in these plots here. Here we've got, again, 18, let me count those again, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, yes, 18 around here, probably about 45, 35 to 40 maybe. Maybe I ought to be a little bit, because I haven't counted them yet, a little conservative. Maybe about 35 to 40 kernels on each of these rows here. Definitely looking at 170, 180 bushel corn here and this hybrid here. I think if we got out of the water, this hybrid will be very competitive, the 68, 69, but boy, this one sure looks like it's going to yield here.
So you mentioned maturity as a selection criteria early on when we were introducing this test. Given what we've seen with the mediums, given what we've seen with the late, we really haven't looked at the early hybrids. Given the planting date, we planted this location on April 11th. Right. Did we make a good selection if we had planted a late versus a medium? What would have been our best selection for maturity in that situation?
Well, I think these ears and looking at the plants here show that it looks like these late hybrids in this year were a better selection than the mediums. And I think that makes sense from the standpoint of the rainfall that we've experienced, lots of rain, cool weather early on. I think the lates avoided some of that stress and that heat. Now that may not make much sense there, but I think they pollinated early enough to avoid that and therefore went on to have a better yield potential here. It could be the other way around. If this year had been dry early, why these mediums might show a little bit better.
Does that fit with the GDUs, the silking that you've been talking about during your winter production meetings? Is that what you would have predicted this year?
Yes, I mean, we talked about the fact that it's going to be cool this year and that I thought the GDUs would look like our highest stress would be around the last week in June. That didn't quite pan out, but still the GDUs to silk, if you got it silked before the 10th of July, you were good this year. So that again fits a little bit with what we predicted, which was late heat coming into the summer.
Well, and that proved out with the weather data we looked at for this location. Yeah. Our hottest temperatures at this location happened after the 15th of July. Right. Those 11 days after the 15th of July were above 95 to 100 and dry. So we definitely missed that stress period by having that maturity hybrid out here and maybe realizing some extra yield potential off of that. Yeah. Dad mentions GDUs to silking. Your first question is going to be, where do I find that information? Along with the yield information on the OVT website, we have all the hybrids that we can find linked to external company tech sheets. And on those external company tech sheets, they list GDUs to silking, don't they?
They sure do.
Dr. Heiniger uses this to find those GDUs to silking for those exact same presentations that he gives every winter.
Yeah. Well, there's where we get the data, and there's where you can find the data. And today we've looked at some top hybrids here in Sampson County. You know, when you go to the grocery store next time, just think about selected corn hybrids, and maybe you'll make the better choice of cornflakes or bread. So have a great day.